Well, Peter, let's officially get started here and get into our webinar. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Today's webinar brought to you by Cleanfax with sponsor SteraMist and Sunbelt Rentals. It's Insurance Restoration Strategies Unlocked. How to identify and conquer the top challenges in the industry. So that's our topic today, and we look forward to the next hour or so sharing some ideas with you folks who are here as attendees. But again, we want to hear from you as well. So let's go ahead and get into our content. My name is Jeff Crosa. I'm the moderator of this. Peter is our expert. We'll talk about Peter in a moment. But I'm the media director for Cleanfax and ISSA. And assisting us today is Martha Schmidt. She's our ISSA virtual events producer. And she's running things behind the scenes. Patricia LaCroix is our associate editor for Cleanfax. She'll be watching the chat in the Q&A portal and making sure that we don't miss anything you folks want to ask. So if we, by chance, miss something, we'll follow up with you after the event. We'll have a transcript of your questions. So it's all about interaction. We want to have, you folks are all muted, but you can definitely put comments in the chat. This recording of this webinar will be available in a couple of days. You will receive a copy of this by email. It'll also be on our website, cleanfax.com, under the video tab. So be sure to use this. Watch it again if you'd like. Share it with others, maybe teammates, marketing people in your company who will get something from this webinar. Want to invite everyone to look at ISSA as your association for cleaning and restoration. So if you're not a member of ISSA, take a moment to visit our website, issa.com, or email membership@issa.com. We have all kinds of benefits for you as restoration contractors, cleaning contractors, but we're here for you to serve you as best we can. And speaking of the chat, I see a fellow Buckeye. Sandra says she's formerly from Ohio, looks like. So welcome, Sandra. See, we're going to keep an eye on the chat. That's what we're going to do. Today's speakers, as I mentioned, I'm your moderator. Peter Crosa is our active insurance claims adjuster. Peter, what does AIC RPA stand for?
Well, AIC is literally Associate in Claims, which means I've studied some exhaustive collegiate level classes in insurance. And RPA is a society of registered professional adjusters, which demands that you've had a minimum number of years in property claims. So it's kind of a couple of designations I'm proud of, and it's recognizable in my industry, although, you know, doesn't mean much to other people. By the way, I had a couple of spots there where you dropped out and your camera froze. So I don't know if it's a problem with my end or we could blame Martha or somebody, but just wanted to make you aware of it in case it is something to be managed.
Well, I tell you what, we are dealing with internet, so you just never know what's going to happen. So we'll hope for the best. But as long as people can hear you, Peter, that's what matters. Okay. But how long have you been in the industry as an adjuster?
Oh, I'm embarrassed to tell you, but let's say several decades.
Several decades. So you've seen some stuff, and that's why we want you on this webinar to share your expertise. Because when you think about the restoration industry and you being an adjuster, I'm sure that people want to ask you some questions about what they can do to get in with insurance companies. So let's move on, and want to mention this to everybody. We have 2 chat questions coming up. And when you see this, we want you to definitely type in your questions or comments. And you don't have to do it in that moment, but Patricia, I think, is going to put the question in the chat to remind you of what that is. So feel free to comment on those when we see this. But this is definitely where we want to get some comments from you in our webinar. And we have our first sponsor message, one of 2. This is SteraMist. Let's watch.
SteraMist's IHP technology is the all-in-one disinfection technology that benefits every space, no matter if it's residential or commercial. SteraMist works wonders on various materials, from stainless steel to plastic and even wood and vinyl, with zero corrosion or damage to the surface, even with daily use. The patented EPA-registered technology ensures a comprehensive defense against harmful microbes. From healthcare facilities to homes and commercial spaces, you can trust SteraMist for a powerful, non-toxic solution that puts safety first. Switch to a disinfection system with maximum efficacy with minimal effort. Visit our website, steramist.com, to discover the IHP difference and contact us today.
And we thank SteraMist for their sponsorship of this webinar, and we'll have one more commercial later. Here's our first chat question. So share your thoughts now if you'd like. Here's where, when Peter and I have done seminars in the past, we've started off with this question of some sort. Like, what is it you're dealing with? Is it about getting work? Is it about getting paid? Turning in an invoice, and now you know you're going to be fighting that invoice? What is it that you are dealing with? And whether or not you answer that now or put it in later, that's what we want to do. We want to make sure that in this hour we cover what you are concerned with. And typically it's some of the same concerns, but a different variation of it. So in the chat there, just think about that. Put in there what you'd like to cover today. So here we go, Peter. Here's some thoughts. I think you can see those. Amanda says, timely response from insurance adjusters. Is that an issue, Peter?
Absolutely.
Aren't you guys there ready to serve no matter?
Well, we are. My
Okay.
firm is. Okay. We promote that we respond to every email within 30 minutes and every phone call, no voicemail, minimal voicemail activity. But that's our firm, but we don't get that from the rest of the industry. We do have to interact with other adjusting companies and other insurance companies. And I can tell you, nobody ever answers their phone. So you're leaving voicemail. They're a little better on email. You will get some better responses from email. So whenever you encounter adjusters, get their business card, get not only their best contact phone number, but also get their emails. But because you can communicate with them nowadays, 24 hours. I'm getting emails from clients and other insurance adjusters at 10 o'clock on a Friday or on a Sunday night. There seems to be no limit because so much is being done remotely now.
Yeah, good comments. So we have some of the same issues here, getting jobs, getting leads. We're going to cover that and dig into that somewhat in our webinar today. So keep the thoughts coming, everybody. Look forward to that. So Peter, this is our first talking point. Insurance companies, what are their goals? How do they serve their clients? What do they not want you to know? I know you have some thoughts on what insurance companies, what their drive is, their vision, what they want to do. Can you talk about that a bit?
Okay. So as you know, I've been around a long time.
Decades.
The industry has changed from when I first started in the business. Right now, conditions are somewhat hostile because profitability is impacted. I don't know if you want to say it's climate change or just that more people have built their homes in areas that are more subject to catastrophic storms, but the industry is responding, and it's somewhat of a hostile environment. But let's start with this. You're all business people. In terms of business, an insurance company's goal is to sell policies to people who never make a claim. That's like the ideal scenario for an insurance company. That's like 100% pure profitability. Sell insurance policies to people who don't make claims. Now, let's say I'm an insurance company. As an insurance company, I can tolerate once in a while if somebody from a group of people, let's say the state of Florida, makes a claim, I can deal with that. But if 80% of the people in the state of Florida make a claim, now it's war, and it has become that in the industry. So once you make a claim with your insurance company, and you won't read this anywhere, you won't hear any insurance person telling you this, but once you make a claim, they're watching you, right? They're watching you because the probability of you filing a second claim over the next 3 to 5 years is increased. You're more likely to file a second claim once you file the first claim. And the probability increases exponentially. So once you've filed 2 claims within a 3 to 5 year period, you're being watched, and they're thinking about dropping you. And if you make that third claim in 3 to 5 years, chances are you're on a chopping block and on a hit list Nobody will ever admit to that. They won't say that publicly, but that's just my observation and my opinion. And I really understand this business because I've been around so long. I'm an old guy, Jeff.
You still got it, Peter. Thank you for those. Yeah, we are going to talk about the combative attitude in a moment, but what type of insurance companies would you say are easier to work with? Not that we're going to mention names, but are there thoughts there for our, because everyone here is a restoration contractor for the most part.
Okay, let me tell you one thing though that's significant about what I just said about people who make claims. Okay,
Mhm.
that when a person makes a claim, and you're in a controversy, you're a contractor, and you're involved in a controversy between the property owner and their insurance company. Don't make the assumption that the insurance company really cares about these people and cares about policyholder retention. They want to retain policyholders, but the policyholder they want to retain never makes a claim. And that's where their focus is. So when someone asks you to take a hit, oh, do it for the widow Brown, she's and widow Brown, figuratively speaking, is that person that is financially challenged and can't defend themselves and can't argue for themselves and has a loss that they can't afford the shortfall to afford to handle the shortfall. Don't make the mistake of assuming when they tell you, well, take a hit for the widow Brown because we can't do anything else for her. Don't make that mistake and acquiesce to that, because she's not a desirable policyholder to them once she's made a claim or two. And that's anathema to the industry. And some of my peers in the industry would hate me for making that statement, but it's my observation. So, okay, so your next point, repeat.
Well, isn't insurance to be used? I mean, you buy it to protect your car, your house.
No.
No,
No.
okay.
Buy insurance to lessen the burden of a loss. Okay. In the old days, when America first started and people lost their barn, they had no insurance. Their neighbors would come and help them rebuild the barn, that sort of thing. That used to go on. So as insurance developed, it always was intended to lessen the burden, not to necessarily make you whole. Has come into play. Oop. Oh, no.
You're okay.
Okay, well, a bad screen came up asking me to sign in
Just
again.
kill that.
Okay, so you can hear me.
Yep.
Well, all right, I don't know how to kill that, but I'll just say deny. No, maybe I'll say always. Anyway, I'm going to keep talking. So where was,
Technology.
okay, I was talking about the concept of lessening the burden. That is ultimately what insurance is to do. And that means that you're still going to bear some burden. Now, in the heyday, when profitability was really high, they said, we'll make you whole again. But what you don't understand as a consumer is what making you whole means. Okay. So if I lost a 5-year-old pair of shoes, to use a very basic example, making me whole again is getting me another 5-year-old pair of shoes. But you can't go out and buy a 5-year-old pair of shoes. Maybe nowadays you can on the internet, but basically you can't. So my shoes were worth $100 when I bought them 5 years ago, but now they're 5 years old. So what do you owe me? $100? No, you owe me a depreciated value of that pair of shoes. So now you only owe me $50. I can't take that $50 to go out and buy the same shoes. But by your definition, the insurance company's definition, you've made me whole because you gave me the value of a used pair of shoes. So just take that concept and apply it to residential structures, and you'll understand what I'm talking about. So as a property owner, you're always going to take a hit when you have an insurance claim. The question is, how much of a hit are you going to take? In the old days, when profitability was high, they were telling you, we'll give you full replacement costs, we'll do this, we'll do that, and you will hardly, in terms of somebody's advertising slogan is like it never happened. But today, when insurance companies are tightening the purse strings, they're transferring a little bit more of the burden back to the policyholder. So you're still going to get some payout, but it's not going to be it's not going to really make you whole the way you think making you whole means, and you're still going to take a hit to some extent, if that helps.
It helps. It helps a lot. So yeah, it's unfortunate because then your restoration contractor has to deal with this information serving a client who assumes everything's going to be brought back to brand new. I would think that would be a tough conversation to have. But let's move on, Peter, to our next point, because we're going to talk about pricing, and a couple of comments we've had in the chat were about that. And when a contractor turns in their invoice, is it a price or is it an estimate? This is something that I heard a lot of conversation on at the last RAA conference I attended. What do you think about this? Using the word estimate kind of sets you up for someone to come back with a different price, right?
Yes, sure. Okay, now let me tell you this. I can no longer see the chat and I can't see us, but I can hear you and I guess you can see me, so I'm going to continue to talk.
Yeah, you're fine.
But I will not know if anybody's putting anything up in the chat. I don't have access to it for some
Yeah,
reason.
I'll read them to you if we get some.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So that question again was about estimating. Well, here's the big controversy. Okay. When estimating came into play about 25, 30 years ago, adjusters took it and interpreted it to mean this is what the value of your claim is. Whatever data I enter into my software and whatever that software spits out, that's what you should be able to go out and replace this job for, which kind of is not fair, but because if an adjuster relies strictly on that, and you're getting estimates from a contractor that says it's that times 2 or times 0.5, you're in a quandary here. You're in a dilemma. So it's true. An estimate is an estimate. And all of the software programs will tell you this is just an estimate. This is not the final word on what the value of this job is. And when they've been interviewed in public, and the restoration industry has done a good job of this lately, to take the estimating software creators to task and they'll say, well, it's just an estimate. That's what it says. And then ultimately the value of the claim is what you can settle it for. And a lot of adjusters aren't aware of that. Okay. Less experienced adjusters are not aware that they have to haggle out there in the field. And then contractors are dealing with adjusters who are being very rigid and saying, well, this is what Xactimate says you should get, and this is what I'm paying, and that's all that I'm paying. So it is a controversy, without a doubt, but it's not the bottom line. It's not really the value of a claim necessarily.
Yeah, I just think calling it an estimate opens it up for negotiation. When you go to a store and you buy something, there's the price. There's no solution here, is there, other than just work with what you got?
Well, in my world, everything is negotiable, Jeff. And to any adjuster who really understands the process and his role, everything is negotiable. So when you say an estimate, I mean, this is an estimate. This is what we want to do your job for. And then the invoice is something entirely different. That's true. And if you go to trial, an estimate is an estimate and an invoice is an invoice. And that's what the value of the claim is.
So, Peter, you can't see the chat, but I'll read this to you. Tom Snyder says, there is no consistency with adjusters, even within the same company in the same area.
Totally true statement.
Can you expand?
Well,
why?
It's a true statement because there's a lot of subjectivity to adjusting claims. I mean, I'm coming just short of saying it's an art, but there is an element of that to it. And every adjuster approaches it differently. And some adjusters who are, let's say, less experienced will approach it different from a really experienced adjuster who handles large losses. He's used to paying out millions of dollars. He's not going to quibble with you over a $39 line item necessarily. And so that's the situation. But what is the answer to that? If you want to state that as a fact, that means you got to study your market. You got to know your industry. And you can't just be out there blind and running into adjusters and assuming that they all act the same way or respond the same way. You've got to understand the industry. And there is a way to learn about the industry. And that's kind of what we're doing here.
Peter, there's another question going back a couple of points about using pricing software. So without picking on a company, we'll just rephrase that. Do you have to use pricing software? Do adjusters expect that? Is that like the baseline expectation?
Yeah, it pretty much is. Now, I've handled claim. I had a claim not too long ago in rural Georgia where a roofer on a hotel roof, his estimate was repair hotel roof $30,000. It's a minor claim, not a major thing. Repair hotel roof 30, and he was the guy that was going to do that job because he was in tight with the owners of the hotel. So I had to work out an agreement with him, but I could not submit his estimate for approval to my client, the insurance company. I was going to have to write my own estimate using software so that the insurance company examiner, who may never have been to a burned out building or stepped on a roof or a flooded building, so that the insurance company examiner could understand, well, he's saying it's going to take 30,000, but your estimate is 28.5 or something, or your estimate is 33, settle for the 30, it's a good number. That can happen, but most of the time, adjusters expect to see some kind of itemized estimate.
Okay, let's move on to our next point. We touched on this a bit, Peter. Is the combative attitudes? Why is that? Is there a solution? And I know that you and I have talked about this a bit. Why is this even happening when we're talking about a transaction where something needs to be fixed? Can you comment on that?
Yeah, I'll tell you something. Going back to the beginning of software in the insurance claims industry, before that, it was real tedious. We used to use you may be familiar if you've been around, something called Craftsman books that had unit prices for a lot of things, repair items, but they were books. And they had done some studies on labor and materials and so on, but they weren't updated. They weren't regionalized. You just had to go with that as a basis to try and write some estimate. And the insurance industry was always suspicious of the contracting industry. And so they went to, looking at contractors' bids and they were not itemized either with software, and trying to balance the scales and get some kind of justification for how much they were paying on a claim. But there was always a level of mistrust. And so with the development of software, insurance companies now saw, wow, we can write our own estimate and tell this guy this is what this thing should be, and here's the justification for it. And so there was always an attitude like contractors are the bad guy. We owe the policyholder something, and we got to wrestle with the contractor to come up with a figure. But there was always this mistrust. There was never an attitude of the contractor is our friend because he's going to help us deliver the promises to our policyholder. That doesn't exist. And anybody that ever conveyed that to you is, all right, I'm not going to say what it is, but it's not the way things have ever worked, really. And there may be companies that advertise that way, but it's not the reality. So with the existence of software, adjusters are supposed to be able to technically compete with the contractor and create what a proposal should be. And so therein began this controversy and this conflict and this fight. And then with the starting of lack of profitability with the insurance companies on property claims, particularly homeowners, which in itself is a losing proposition. They have other silos of business in the insurance industry that are very profitable. So companies are not going under, but they don't like the lack of profitability in the homeowner sector. And that's why when it becomes so unprofitable that we would have to raise rates so high, they just decide to leave the state, as has happened in Florida, and it's happening in California, and there's another state, possibly New York, where companies are just saying, we can't be profitable here without charging these people excessive amounts of rate increases, which the regulators will not allow. So we're just pulling out. We're not going to write business there. So therein lies the conflict: lack of profitability and distrust between the two industries, insurance and the restoration industry.
So is there a solution? Do you see things getting better or staying the same or getting worse?
Well, they're not getting better, I can tell
Okay.
you. And but here's what I would do. So if I was a contractor, any of you people out there listening to this, if you're not mingling with adjusters at claims association meetings, you're making a big mistake because look at all the franchising companies, look at all the uh, um, repair the third party administrators that do vetting for contractors, and look at all of the large contractors, the big brand names I'm talking about, the very large ones that can handle multi-million-dollar jobs. All those people market to the insurance industry. They attend. If I go to any adjuster meeting anywhere, there's going to be a contractor there with a booth, or they're meeting people, meeting adjusters, just mingling, because it really helps as an adjuster. When I go to a claim, it affects my level of comfort and lack of anxiety on a claim when I encounter a contractor who understands the insurance business. If I encounter a contractor that I've never heard of, never seen, never known, and he doesn't know me and he doesn't know how my industry operates, there's a problem right there. It can be a problem. I typically will learn how to manage that, but a lot of adjusters won't. And they'll just see you as an enemy and a potential threat, and that'll be the start of that whole claim, and it won't get better. Unless you do a couple of things, and unless you make the effort to try and understand the adjusters, where they live and where they eat and drink.
Mm-hmm. Good information. Let's move on to our next point. We have a few questions coming in. We are going to get to some of these because a couple of these we'll answer at the end. But Peter, here's a topic that I know you love to talk about: the freebies. What do you do about referral fees, deductibles, gratuities, and comps? It's all good, right?
Well, I mean, as a businessman, and anything that I can declare to the IRS that they accept as legal is okay for me, as far as I'm concerned, operating my business. If I in my business, the adjusting business, we market our services to the insurance industry as well. And we might get referred a case from another adjuster. And I don't necessarily feel like we have to pay a referral fee, but we could have some arrangements that would make that okay and legal. But in the insurance industry doesn't like that, for contractors to give anyone a referral fee, even a plumber. Let's say you hook up with a plumber and a plumber handles a water loss and he's going to give you a tip or invite you in on the claim and you give him a fee. Insurance industry hears about that and they consider that fraud, and waiving of deductible as well. If and I teach adjuster ethics sometimes, and so I speak to a group of adjusters, and I pose this question. Let's say a contractor is going to make 10,000 profit on a claim, and he decides that instead of making 10,000 profit, he's going to only make 9,000 and not collect the deductible. And basically, so he doesn't collect the $1,000 deductible to induce that job to happen. He's going to tell the property owner, well, you won't have to pay me your deductible if you let me do this job. Okay, right? You get it? So he's going to make 10 grand profit, but now he's only going to make 9 grand profit, and he's okay with that. If the insurance company heard of that, they'd consider that criminal and fraud. And when I do these classes for adjusters, you'd be amazed at how adjusters key in on that, as to why it's fraud and why it's criminal, why it shouldn't be done. As a businessman, I understand the idea of making a little less profit if you have to refer to somebody or do that kind of thing, but it's not acceptable to the insurance industry, and you can't do it. And in some states, it's actually illegal to do. Now, as far as promo and entertainment, again, IRS recognizes that you're a business person and you have promo and entertainment costs and so on, but the insurance industry says no. So they tell their adjusters, you can't accept a gift or gratuity in excess of $25, or you can't go to lunch with vendors, or you can't entertain anything from vendors. They have rules. And I had never, in the old days, let's say prior to the last 20 years where that's become an issue, in the 90s, let's say, I could take a client to lunch. I could call an insurance examiner. I could send them a turkey at Christmas or Thanksgiving or something. And, so just as a token of appreciation and to enhance this relationship, it's a legitimate business expense according to the IRS, but not the insurance industry. So they look down on that.
Peter, I see all kinds of smoke coming out of my computer because I don't think everyone is maybe knew some of this, or maybe some are doing referral fees. I know that plumbers paying money or contractors paying plumbers for leads is a issue. And a lot of people do it.
I personally don't have a problem with it, but I would just keep it on the down low, because there are people in the insurance industry that somehow thinks that's a dishonest or it may not be illegal, but they don't like it. They think it's unethical.
Okay, we have a few comments coming in based on what we just talked about. Brent wants to know, how are referral fees an issue when TPAs that facilitate with insurance companies explicitly charge referral fees for jobs that are referred to vendor contractors?
Yeah, well, there's all we're not going to debate this thing, but there's all kinds of inequities in life. And, I frequently think about the issue concerning attorneys. Attorneys can refer cases to each other and give each other referral fees. And sometimes it's 25% of the value of the case. But I can't refer a case to attorney. He doesn't owe me anything. It's illegal for him to give me or anybody else a referral fee unless that person is a lawyer. That seems inequitable to me. And the whole concept of referrals doesn't bother me personally as a businessman. And to be honest, the heads of insurance companies are going to somebody's condo down in the Bahamas and so on. All that stuff happens, but it happens on the down low. And if you, as a vendor to contractor, start promoting the idea to the insurance community that you're doing this, they won't like it and they'll consider you unethical. But it's not something to debate. It's just a reality.
Mm-hmm. All right, very good. We're going to get to some more of these questions, but let's move on to our next slide. Here's something to think about for all you attendees. You can put your thoughts in the chat if you'd like. But how do you differentiate yourself and compete against big companies, franchises, or those in a TPA program? So what do you do for all of our attendees to be different, to compete? Are there any thoughts there?
Yeah.
And we're going to get into this in our next slide. So give that some thought, toss your thoughts in, your questions. And Peter, let's look at our next slide. It's close to the end because we're going to do a nice Q&A at the end. But thinking about, you have your restoration contractor. He's got a small company in a market, and he's competing against the larger franchisees, the bigger companies out there. Any thoughts there on what they can do to compete? And TPAs?
Let me tell you a story about myself. So I'm an independent adjuster. I'm a small operator. I'm competing against companies like Crawford and Company, $1 billion company, Sedgwick, billions and billions of dollars in revenues. And how do I compete? Well, I have a territory that I've focused on, Florida and Georgia. And there's one thing that I have that Crawford doesn't have and Sedgwick doesn't have, and that's Peter Crosa and the relationships that I build and the people that confide in me. And what I can do is, I can't compete with these companies on a national basis, but I can compete with them in my territory, and I can handle Florida better than any other independent adjuster can. And you can just transfer that to your business. Let's say you're operating in a major city or a minor city, whatever, in a community. You just need to understand how to work your particular territory and where business that happens in your territory is being supervised. So let's say that you're in South Georgia, okay, and you've got a restoration or mitigation business in South Georgia. How are you going to compete with the big franchises that have national brand and national footprint? Okay, well, first of all, who has business in South Georgia? Well, you're going to find that insurance companies A, B, and C, and they have an Atlanta regional office. Well, you're going to have to meet people in Atlanta at that regional office because they've got business down in your little South Georgia territory. and you're going to have to find out who they are. You have to study your potential market. You just can't wait for things to come your way. So you've got to know, who are the adjusters involved? And where do they operate from? How can I introduce myself to them? How can I let them know I'm here and that I'm personally vested in my business, and I can give them the attention and care that the big people can't give them? And that's how I compete as an adjuster. It's how you can compete as a contractor. And I can tell you, as a practicing adjuster, when I show up on a claim, I don't necessarily care whether you're a national brand or a named brand that I recognize, if I know you on a local basis, and if we've established some kind of rapport, I can totally feel good about that. And any adjuster will feel good about that if he understands you as being someone he met at the Claims Association last month, and they have monthly meetings. So those are ways that you can compete and you can stay ahead.
Some might wonder, Peter, how do they find that information? I know you've talked about that in seminars. Like if you're in a certain market and you want to find who you need to talk to, are there
Okay.
resources besides Google?
Yes, yes. So there are resources. There's something called claimspages.com, claimspages.com, that tries to identify every claims association throughout the country. But you can just go to Google. Let's say you're in Savannah, Georgia. Go to Google and Google, enter Savannah Claims Association. And maybe Savannah will come up, or Chatham County will come up, and there's a claims association in that area. Find out. Or if you run into an adjuster on a chance or on a claim, just ask them, hey, are there any claims associations in this area where you go to monthly meetings? Because they're everywhere. If I'm in the St. Pete area, but there's some in little towns like Bradenton, Sarasota, and all the way down to Fort Myers and Naples. There's claims associations everywhere where adjusters get together for a monthly meeting, and everyone is welcome to go. You can go and meet these people. So it's out there. And of course, in our webinars, we have a lot more time to talk about it and actually show you how to do some of the research, but it can be done.
Okay, very good. I will mention this. Stacy Clark put in the chat, Peter, that all of our claims associations have dissolved over the past 10 years. And I don't recall where Stacy's from, but do you see that, Peter, that there are fewer of those claims associations, or maybe some consolidation?
No, I think it was Stacy Clark from Boone, North Carolina. Somebody was from Boone, North Carolina, and I thought, that's God's country. But
Stacy just replied, Elkhart, Indiana.
oh,
It's
well,
beautiful in Elkhart, Indiana.
that's almost unforgivable. So, okay, how cold is it in Elkhart? Let me address the question. Okay. There is a complaint from the insurance community that claims associations have become overloaded with vendors. So, for example, the Tampa Bay Claims Association, that has just sort of revitalized since the COVID depression, is starting to grow. And it started with vendors, because vendors want to bring adjusters in. That's their goal. And I'm one of those vendors, technically, to the insurance adjusting industry. And so it is slowly starting to come back. And that is true of claims associations everywhere, because post-COVID, we all got kind of like cabin fever, and we're liking the idea of getting together. So I'm telling you right now, there are conferences and associations across the country. I mean, you could go to one every week if you wanted to on a national level, but certainly on a local level, you'll be able to find them. And they may be heavy with vendors at first. Let's say you go and there's one or two claims people. There might be independent adjusters there because they're vendors too. And those people are definitely a good potential market for you. That's where it begins. If you can find independent adjusters like myself, and we're likely to go to any association meeting, even if there's 80% vendors there. But the benefit is that the existence of that association depends on that group of vendors bringing in more company adjusters to that. So it behooves you to be a part of that, even though it's heavy weighted with vendors. But I would say it's not correct to say that the claims associations have dissolved. Not correct. I wouldn't agree with that.
Okay.
And in fact, post-COVID, they're coming back.
Yeah. Well, Stacy, if you want to argue that with Peter, I will connect you by email later on. So reach out and we'll do that. So let's move on to our next slide, really our final thought one before we get into our questions that we have. So Peter, did we miss anything? Anything big you want to say or share that is important?
Well, I would say that if you find with a certain client that you're knocking your head against the wall to get paid what you feel you should get paid and then to collect, I would not do business with that particular person. And we've said no ourselves to certain insurance companies that we don't like their ethics and we don't like how they handle policyholders, because some companies are not designed to be, good hand neighbors and all, like a good neighbor and all that stuff. Some companies are designed to collect your premium and beat you up if you make a claim. You'll never hear that anywhere else, but I've been around and I know what I'm saying and I know what I've observed. So I don't do business with those companies. So and your bad experience with one company doesn't mean it'll be like that for other companies. If you build a relationship with an adjuster that you find in your community, that can go well for you if you have an understanding. If he knows that you're not into ripping companies off, or that you're not going to be a ombudsman for the policyholder against him, but you just want to work with him to get the claim resolved according to what the insurance company owes, that'll go well for you.
Good information. Before we get into our Q&A, we have one final sponsor message. So Peter, we'll get into the good stuff in a moment. And we thank Sunbelt for their sponsorship. I think everyone is a customer of Sunbelt Rentals at one time in their life or another. Well, Peter, you ready?
I'm ready.
Some questions?
Can you see me?
We can see you just fine. Yes.
Okay.
So here's a question. Why are restorers required to go to all these different schools and get all these certifications, but adjusters aren't trained at all or very little in mitigation, but they're seen as experts? Peter,
Okay.
why is that?
So you recognize the man behind the curtain. I just saw the Wizard of Oz, and if you know the allegory there, look, adjusters are trained in insurance. The people that run insurance companies train their staff to understand insurance and insurance policies and so on. There is some minimal training that some of the adjusters go through to understand, or to try and understand what you do, what restoration contractors do. But there's no way they can become experts. They haven't done it. And unfortunately, when you run into one that has done it, he's even more dangerous than, because he did it 5 or 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and the costs are totally different today. But that's just the way it is. And, again, part of the iniquities of life. You're in the reconstruction business, a mitigation business. You need to become more and more trained in your specialty, in your profession, and that's commendable. I wish, and I've said this to the restoration industry, I wish the people in my industry clearly understood how important education and professional development is to your industry, but they don't, and they don't appreciate it. So it's inequitable, but that's just the way it is.
Okay. Yeah, there's an expert on every corner, isn't there?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Another question from the audience: how can small or new companies in the restoration industry apply to be listed as vendors for the insurance companies? I know you love that question.
Okay, well, I'm not a big fan of the preferred vendor programs, the managed repair organizations. Not a big fan of them because they hold you to certain operational actions. For example, they tell you how to price. They tell you how to collect. You can't sue their policyholder ever, even if the guy runs away with the money and won't pay you. And so there's certain things that I don't like about that. Otherwise, you find policyholders, and when they have a loss and you get called in, you find a way to promote your business that way. But I like the idea of meeting adjusters, and we talked about that, how to meet adjusters, where to find them, and develop that relationship. Adjusters won't usually call you, but if they do call you for corroboration on an estimate, that's a good thing, because now that's reinforcing that relationship. But if you want to be in a preferred vendor program, you just contact them and tell them how to jump through the hoops and do that. They're out there. There's a ton of them out there. You can Google third-party administrators and Google preferred vendor programs for insurance companies, and you'll come up with, there's a ton of them.
All right, thank you. Another question, what stands out on a T&M invoice, time and material, I'm assuming, that causes an immediate red flag with adjusters?
Anything that says miscellaneous, forget about it. Or you know, I hate it when a contractor tells me, well, you know, I never know what I might find when I get in there. So he's added in $5,000 for something. No, it's not going to work.
Yeah,
That's
part of that,
in my mind.
part of that question is, otherwise, what are adjusters looking to remove or reduce on a TMN invoice? So besides miscellaneous, is there something that catches their eye?
Anything that's subject to, that's subjective, like tear out and debris removal, 800 man hours at X amount of dollars. That 800 man hours is a guesstimate, and it's negotiable. So if I see that on an estimate, or just a blanket amount, or if I see per subcontractor bid electrical $35,000, I want to see the bid. And then if I see the bid and it's repair electrical $35,000, not going to work. You're going to have a problem with that.
Okay. Another question, who has the most influence or leverage with an adjuster when there is a dispute or a combative issue on a claim?
Among who? Is
Yeah,
that a choice? Well,
who has
okay.
the most influence?
You have the policyholder, property owner, you have the insurance agent, you have the claims manager, and then you have the contractor. So the contractor is asking me who has the most influence. Okay, well, most adjusters hate agents. There are some companies that promote that relationship, very few, very few. But most adjusters hate agents. So the agent, you're not going to call the agent and say your adjuster's being less than desirable, you know, do something about it. No, because the adjuster is going to resist him. It depends on the claim. It's not an easy answer. It really depends on the claim.
The adjuster and the agent don't get along. That's kind of funny, really.
It's a bizarre thing, because what is this all about? You would think that what this is all about is resolving and helping the policyholder with good relations between the adjuster and the agent. But most adjusters will tell you they don't like agents, and agents sometimes stand in as an ombudsman on a claim, protecting the policyholder, arguing coverage with the adjuster. So it's generally, you know, not a good relationship. But I start out with a good relationship with my agents always. So, but I'm a different kind of adjuster, so you won't always. By the way, you have me now. You can ask me questions. You may never get an opportunity to ask questions of someone with my experience and level in the industry. So please let it run.
Yeah, we got about 8 more minutes, so put questions in the chat if you'd like. I'll keep an eye on that. We have a couple more. Here's one, Peter. Do insurance adjusters care about mold that can start in a few days when their process slows down my work?
Okay, mold is a bad word, right? Mold and
Did
rot.
we not say it?
Wood rot. Yeah. You know, so when you say mold, well, you know, the insurance years ago, the insurance industry got nailed by mold on it, because nobody knew what mold was, you know. So, you know, mold has been around forever. It was never an issue when I started in the industry. So they got nailed. So then they wrote mold out of the policy. So mold is like either limited 5 or 10 grand or whatever. But if you find mold, I don't find that it's a big deal, but I've got limitations. And if you quantify something and you describe something as mold in your estimate, then those line items are going to be subject to limitations or a total denial if mold is not covered on a particular claim. So mold doesn't scare me, doesn't scare any adjuster.
Okay. So if an adjuster in the process of doing their work slows down the mitigation, the drying, that's not a concern too much.
Well, if you're saying that we were doing this dry out job and we tore out a piece of drywall and all of a sudden we found a ton of mold in there, and now we can't do anything until the mold is remediated. But the problem is, and this is what causes delays, there may be no coverage for the mold. Now what? The property owner has to pay for that remediation. So now your job is held up. Well, what am I supposed to do? I'm the adjuster. We can't pay for it. Somebody's got to pay for it. So yeah, it's a problem. And it's not a resolvable problem.
Or Widow Brown.
Yeah, yeah. And that you'll see more and more of that as time goes by. More of the risk and the exposure is being transferred to the property owner. And those property owners that don't have the funding, you're going to see a lot of blue tarps on roofs forever, you know, and things like that. Houses that are in disrepair for that reason. It's problematic. It's a real problem, and particularly in Florida.
Yeah. Amanda has a question. How can we get better communication from adjusters when they are not local?
Get their phone, get their email, and if they're not, they won't return your calls. A lot of times they just won't return your calls. So try emailing. And if you can't reach them that way, appeal to the agent on behalf of the policyholder. We're trying to reach this adjuster and we can't get him. That's kind of what you can do.
Yeah. And some comments here. Tom Snyder says, good luck. There you go.
Good luck with communicating with adjusters.
Yeah, that's right.
It's tough. That's why you need to build relationships and know them so they don't treat you like a stranger.
Another question, is adjuster marketing going to go the way of the dodo bird as carriers leverage more tech and shift to adjusting from the desk more than the field? So remote adjusters, I believe, is the...
Well, the industry is devoted to wiping people like me out. The industry is devoted to that. I don't know if it's going to happen in 10 years, 20 years, but they are dedicated to do that. And what that means, though, is that the policyholder is going to be handling their own claim, taking photographs of the damage. Then they'll send those photographs to a computerized, desk review, estimating what the damages should be. And any shortfall is going to be the burden of the policyholder anyway, because they're restricting coverage more and more. So yeah, the industry is trying to wipe us out. There's something called parametric insurance, which is where an insurance company comes in and installs devices in your home so that if a water level reaches a certain height, well, they'll pay you $10,000. If it goes another height, another $75,000. And this, they don't even need an adjuster. They just read the gauges on this equipment that they've installed with regard to flood anyway. But that gives you an indication of what they're trying to do and where they're headed.
Peter, there's a question about your email. Can people email you later?
Yeah, I don't mind. Peter at peterjcrosa.com.
Patricia, maybe you can put that in the chat for everybody. You might get a couple emails, Peter, with some questions.
Okay.
Yeah, so let's see. Here's a question. Let's talk about the assignment of benefits. That's a big controversial thing, right? In Florida anyway.
Well, yeah, it got canceled. They wrote it out of the law, so it's not legal after a certain date. And what it meant was the contractor assumes all of the rights of the insurance policy, which what that means is that the Widow Brown, if you're an insurance company, the Widow Brown was not likely to sue you, so you could kind of manhandle her in a way. Now I'm being harsh on the insurance industry, but that typically is what the public perceives. All right, so you manhandle the Widow Brown. Now she signs all of her rights away to some corporate conglomerate contractor who can sue the insurance company for the next 3 years for $50 million. And that's why the insurance company hated AOBs. And that's essentially what AOBs are. And there was a downside to that. I didn't like it because when I came on a claim with an AOB, the contractor was like not friendly because he's thinking in his mind, I'm going to sue you. Whatever, I'm suing you. And he's writing an exorbitant estimate. And so it was kind of a negative, but I was indifferent to it. I just accept what the rules are and I handle my claims accordingly because I'm not this kind of adjuster. I am a professional and try to treat people, with the golden rule in mind, according to what I can do for them in terms of the policy.
I like that. That's a good philosophy, and I think most here would probably agree. Just work with the rules and run your business as best you can, honestly, with integrity. Let's do one more question, Peter, and then we'll wrap it up. This one is, why does it take so long to get coverage confirmations and estimate approvals when waiting holds up projects? So as an adjuster, why does it take so long?
There's not a good reason for that usually. And sometimes I'll tell you one thing. People, and particularly insurance company people, have a hard time making a decision. Okay. And the issues at stake are, well, if I deny coverage, I'm going to get sued. If I accept coverage, I might pay something that my supervisors might later tell me was inappropriate. So there's a unwillingness to make a decision or stick your neck out, and that could be a problem. The other issue is really, if it goes before the right person, a decision can be made right away. And sometimes they'll delay on that decision because it benefits them to delay. And then you're more likely to acquiesce to compromises and so on. So there's not a good reason for that. If whatever the question is gets to the right party, it should be able to be made right away. Now, what I find in some of the claims I handle, I'm waiting for a client to make a decision on something and they say, well, it has to go before a committee and they don't meet until next week. And I just have to wait. And that is true. Some insurance companies operate that way, and people won't make a decision until the committee gives their approval. So.
Well, Peter, that's our hour. I appreciate you joining us and all of our attendees as well. We had a nice engagement. You might get a couple of emails with more questions, and you can handle those as you like. But do want to thank everyone for being here today in our webinar brought to you by Cleanfax and our sponsors. We appreciate everyone's time, and hopefully you got something from this and you can run a better company because of it. So thank you, everyone.